All right, let's dive into something I call the platinum trap. It's this fascinating puzzle, right? We're going to look at why just being super, super rare on planet Earth isn't always enough to actually make you valuable.
Okay, so think about it like this. You're walking through a field and bam, you find a four-leaf clover. That's incredibly rare, right? Like 1 in 1,000 kind of rare? But what happens if you take it to the store and try to buy a candy bar with it? The cashier's just going to give you a funny look. And why is that? Because even though it's rare, nobody actually uses it for anything. It doesn't really have a job. And that simple idea, well, that's the key to our whole story today.
So let's bring this back to platinum. This stuff is 30 times rarer than gold. Just let that sink in for a second. To put that in perspective, if you could melt down all the gold ever mined, it might fill 3 Olympic swimming pools. All the platinum, it would barely come up to your ankles in just one of those pools. So the mystery just gets deeper, doesn't it?
And yeah, this chart just lays the whole paradox out for us, plain as day. Platinum is way, way rarer, but gold is consistently more expensive. So if it's not about rarity, what on earth are we missing here?
Okay, to start unraveling this, we've got to jump in our time machine and look back. Because as you're about to see, history, well, it didn't really treat this supposedly precious metal with a lot of respect.
You know, for centuries, platinum was basically considered junk. Seriously, when the Spanish conquistadors first found it over in South America, they were actually annoyed by it. They called it platina, which basically means little silver, and they just saw it as this annoying impurity in their silver mines that was way too hard to melt. They literally just threw it back in the rivers to get rid of it.
And you have to think about the story behind these metals, right? Gold had a clear role. Gold was for kings, for empires. Silver had its role too. It was the people's money, used for everyday trade. But platinum, it didn't have a story. It didn't have a job. For the longest time, it was for absolutely no one.
So, what changed? How did platinum go from being, river garbage to something people actually wanted to buy? Well, it finally got a job. And not just any job, a very specific, very modern, and really important one.
And its job comes down to this one superpower it has. It's what's called a catalyst. Now, that's just a fancy word for an ingredient that makes a chemical magic trick happen without getting used up itself. It's kind of like the ultimate wingman for chemical reactions.
So what's the magic trick? For decades now, platinum's #1 job has been sitting inside the catalytic converter in your car, assuming you drive a gas car. It sits in the exhaust and takes all that nasty, toxic smoke coming from the engine and magically turns it into much, much cleaner air. This one single job is why its price went through the roof. The more cars the world built, the more platinum the world needed. Simple as that.
And this is where we run right into the trap. Because as the whole world starts shifting to electric cars, cars with no engines, no exhaust pipes, we have to ask ourselves this really crucial question. What happens to a super specialized tool when the machine it was built for starts to disappear?
Right. And this brings us right to the heart of it all, what I call the scarcity trap. This is that moment where an asset's greatest strength, its rarity, suddenly flips and becomes its biggest weakness.
Let me try and explain this with something I call toy store logic. Think of gold like that super popular superhero toy that every kid wants for Christmas. Everybody gets it, from your grandma to the biggest banks in the world. Everyone knows what it is and wants it. That's what we call high liquidity. Now, platinum is like that super rare limited edition robot toy. It's really cool for sure, but only a small, specific group of collectors are actually out there hunting for it. In our case, that's the automakers.
So you see where this is going. As that niche group of buyers, the car companies, starts to shrink, there just aren't enough regular people standing in line waiting to buy up all the platinum. Its price starts to fall. Its rarity can't save it because there's just not enough broad demand. And this all leads us to maybe the most important takeaway from this whole thing. Rare is just a fact. It's a number on a page. But valuable, that's a choice. It's a story that we as humans all agree on. And that story is driven by culture, by history, and most importantly, by whether or not we can actually use the thing.
Okay, so now we get the trap. But what does this mean for platinum's future? Is the story over? Well, not quite.
See, there's another potential job opening up for platinum, and it's a big one: hydrogen power. To create clean energy from hydrogen fuel cells, you need a really powerful catalyst. And guess what? Platinum is the best in the business for that job.
But, and this is a huge but, here's the catch. The value of gold and silver is a fact of the present. We value them right now for what they do today. Platinum's value, on the other hand, is basically a bet on the future. It only becomes super valuable again if this global hydrogen economy really takes off. And honestly, that is still a very, very big if.
All right, so let's boil this all down. What are the big takeaways here? First, just being rare on its own means almost nothing. Second, for something to have real, lasting value, it needs widespread demand and an actual job to do, real utility. And finally, and this is probably the most important part, before you invest in anything just because it's rare, you have to ask who is actually going to need this tomorrow.
So I'll leave you with one final thought experiment, just to see if you've really escaped the trap. Imagine someone offers you two things. In one hand, they have a box of incredibly rare postage stamps from some country that doesn't even exist anymore. In the other hand, they have one simple, totally common silver coin. After everything we've talked about today, what's your choice? I'll let you think about that one.